Good morning, everyone. My name is Hillary Gatlin, and I am the Records Manager for the Duke University Archives. Welcome to Urgent but Slow, Transferring and Appraising the Architectural Records of Duke University. During this presentation, I will outline the University Archives' work with Duke's Facilities Management Department to transfer and appraise the architectural records of the university. This project ramped up quickly and took place over a short time frame, but still required attention to detail and slower iterative processes. This presentation will describe the Duke University Archives' approach to this project, detail the challenges faced and lessons learned, and outline some steps for future work with this collection. To begin, the Duke University Archives is the official repository for the records of Duke University. Part of the Rubenstein Library, the archives collects these historical records and makes them available for research use. The primary way that the archives collects records is through transfers from the records management program. The archives holds over 11,000 linear feet of records in a variety of formats, including some electronic materials. Duke's Facilities Management Department, which is also known as FMD, manages and maintains campus buildings, grounds, and utilities. They oversee the design, construction, and maintenance of buildings, and they create a number of records to support those functions. Prior to this project, the University Archives had collected a small amount of FMD-related material, including a partial set of architectural drawings, as well as some general office files. In early summer 2021, FMD moved forward with the project to digitize all the physical architectural records of the university. Their project involved contracting with an outside vendor. The outside vendor would scan all the materials, supply metadata for each document, and then those documents would be uploaded into Meridian, FMD's digital asset management system. The paper originals would then be destroyed. The primary goal of the scanning project was to empty out FMD's long-standing file plan room and thus convert it into office space. FMD was facing a probable reduction of their office space and felt that the file plan room could be put to better use. FMD started the project with an extremely ambitious time frame, hoping to finish it within 3 months. Here is a picture of a portion of the FMD file plan room. The file plan room contained over 260 flat file drawers holding oversized materials, as well as other cabinets and some drawers for smaller materials. Only the oversized materials in the flat file drawers would be digitized for this project. The vast majority of records in these drawers were already in folders and were labeled. However, the quality of labeling varied over time. The drawers were generally organized by building name. The University Archives was contacted about this project only after FMD's initial project decisions had been made and a vendor had been selected. FMD had originally planned to simply purge the physical files after scanning, but FMD staff decided to check with the University Archives in case we thought any of the physical records would be historically significant. As I mentioned, the University Archives has previously collected architectural drawings from FMD, including some of the first architectural drawings of the university. Duke University was designed by architect Julian Abel, working for the firm owned by Horace Trumbauer, and these first architectural drawings are referred to in-house as the Trumbauers or the Trumbauer drawings. These Trumbauer drawings are some of the most popular items in the University Archives and are frequently requested by researchers. In fact, Duke University has previously funded student and faculty projects related to building history and campus design, including a Bass Connections project. So University Archives definitely wanted some of the architectural drawings from FMD. However, we did not have time to perform the kind of appraisal we would need for these records prior to scanning. Thus, after our initial meeting, the archives agreed to a workflow with FMD and the outside vendor. The process went as follows. FMD would send the drawings to the vendor for scanning. The vendor would complete scanning a set of drawings and then drop off the physical records to the Rubenstein Library. Archive staff would review the scanned records and appraise them for historical value. Records that had historical value would be retained and added to the collection. Those that were not added to the collection would be disposed of securely by archive staff. We received weekly shipments of records for over 6 months. The project ran from June 2021 to mid-December 2021, which was a bit longer than FMD had originally planned. Here is a picture of a weekly shipment of architectural drawings. We received on average 10 to 20 rolls of drawings per week. Each roll represents roughly a drawer of files. The size of these rolls varied from small to extremely large and heavy. Typical materials in these folders included a variety of different kinds of paper materials, as well as some Mylar records. It was determined that FMD would maintain the copy of record for these architectural materials. They would hold a complete set of records in their digital asset management system, and the archives could then feel free to appraise their records for archival or historical value. This decision is in alignment with our current collecting policies and allowed the archives to better focus our limited resources on preserving the records with the greatest historical and teaching impact. To help us evaluate the architectural records, we developed a short set of guidelines for appraisal. These guidelines were updated throughout the project as we became more familiar with the types of records we would find. We retained and added to our collection floor plans and elevations for campus buildings, site plans and other types of landscape drawings, and topography maps and surveys. We also retained records of major renovations, such as a renovation to an entire floor or of an entire building. Finally, we kept detailed drawings of significant campus features, such as the Duke Chapel pipe organs. The records we retained date all the way from the early 1900s to the middle of the 2010s. They include original Horace Trumbauer and Duke Construction Company drawings, as well as more modern architectural drawings for recent buildings and additions, including updates to some of Duke's athletic facilities. The picture on this slide is a Horace Trumbauer drawing of a proposal for Duke's East Campus. Please note the large fountain in the center of campus. That fountain was never built, so it is particularly interesting to see it proposed as an option in a major design feature of East Campus. And here is an example of another type of Trumbauer drawing. These are elevations for the Flowers Building and Page Auditorium, dated 1929. Here are some examples of records we weeded from the collection. We weeded electrical, mechanical, structural, and plumbing records. It is important to note that though these drawings were weeded by the archives, they are still maintained by FMD in electronic format. So if someone needed to see the plumbing for the Flowers Building, they could contact FMD for access to those records. The only electrical, mechanical, structural, and plumbing records that we retained in the archives were those that were part of the original Trumbauer or Duke Construction Company sets. We wanted to take our time to conduct an additional review of those materials to determine their historical value, and they may still be weeded when the collection is fully processed. We also weeded drawings of minor renovations, including single room renovations or smaller modifications. We weeded any drawings that did not have identification or context, such as a building name, and we weeded out any duplicates that we found. So here is an action shot of this process at work. We reviewed over 1,300 folders. We retained over 720 folders of records. This added more than 240 linear feet to the collection. We disposed of 582 folders, as well as additional materials weeded from the folders we retained. We estimate that we retained roughly 55% of the records we reviewed. Our primary deliverable for this project was a comprehensive inventory. We used an Excel spreadsheet to record the folder name, building name, the date if known, the FMD identifier if known, and any additional notes. Our inventory notes both the folders we retained as well as those we disposed of, so we have a good record of what we've discarded. We also noted if folders had been weeded and when, to try to document our actions and be as transparent in our processes as possible. Additionally, we used an iterative process when developing our inventory. This was a very fast-paced project and we had to hit the ground running, but we really did need to slow down when creating the inventory to ensure that it would be useful for both processors and future researchers. It was important for us to take a breath and think through the information that would be needed. For example, we had originally figured that the FMD provided folder name would be substantial enough and we would not need to specifically list out the building name in addition. But due to inconsistencies in the FMD provided description, we realized after a few sets of documents that we needed to go back and add in the building name for clarity. We also added a number of different notes to the inventory to flag material for processors and future researchers. We added notes on the locations of original Trumbauer drawings, which we believe could be a future processing priority. We also noted any records that might support racial justice research here at Duke, such as floor plans indicating separate toilets for white and Black employees. So here is a screenshot of the spreadsheet inventory. I apologize for the small size. You can't see it spread incredibly well, but you can note the variety of notes in the final column, as well as some of the identifiers and date ranges. Overall, we were really pleased with how successful this project was, particularly given how quickly it ramped up, but we did face a number of challenges. First and foremost, we were dealing with a high volume of records in a short time frame, so we needed to set aside a number of hours to review and work on them. One of our biggest concerns was getting bogged down with too much material at once, so we worked to make sure we finished each set of records before the next arrived. We reviewed material for approximately 5 to 10 hours per week, and often two people were working on the records together, one reviewing and one adding information to the inventory. So that was a significant use of our work time and resources. There were other resource challenges as well. Folders were and still are an issue for us. We did not refolder records as we reviewed them. Instead, we retained FMD's folders whenever possible, but those are not archival and will not hold up long term. We will need to purchase folders for the entire collection and eventually refolder it. We also needed to identify space for project staging and long-term storage. We ended up commandeering some of the third floor of the Rubenstein to stage and review these documents. In terms of long-term storage, we used 80 flat file drawers, including some that were originally designated for other Rubenstein Library collecting areas. Finally, we had to locate shred bins that could hold oversized documents. We needed to confidentially shred these architectural records as they contain sensitive data in accordance with Duke's policies. Locating appropriate shred bins was one of the toughest parts of this project, and it took us several months before we found bins that we could successfully use. Some other challenges when appraising and transferring these materials included the presence of duplicates. We were fortunate that FMD did do some appraisal of duplicates on their end in order to minimize the number of documents that they sent out to be scanned, but there are still multiple sets of duplicate drawings in the collection. We tried to weed out these duplicates if they were located in the same folder, but when the duplicates were located in different folders, we had to leave them in, as we simply did not have time to go back and search through previously reviewed folders again. The hope is that we will catch all of these duplicate drawings when the collection is fully processed and that we can weed them out at that time. Additionally, we might now have duplicate drawings in other non-FMD related collections. The archive staff will need to discuss reviewing those materials for possible deaccession. Determining future access to these records was also a challenge. We had a number of discussions during the beginning of the project regarding access to these records. Architectural records can contain sensitive information, and we want to be responsible caretakers of this information. Ultimately, we decided to apply our standard 25-year access restriction to the collection. We also believed that by weeding out the electrical, plumbing, mechanical, and structural drawings, we would be limiting the amount of sensitive information contained in the collection. And finally, one big challenge when working with FMD was that they tended to appraise their records quite differently than us. FMD is naturally focused on maintaining and preserving the records associated with active buildings, as they are responsible for maintaining those buildings. They have much less interest in buildings that were proposed but were never actually built, or buildings that have since been demolished. As you can imagine, those kinds of records are of great use to the archives. In fact, we've had several researchers who've been very interested in what Duke had planned in terms of building and ground design, even if the projects were never ultimately started. So while FMD was not interested in scanning those records, we did work with them to transfer those kinds of materials, even if they were ultimately not scanned as part of the project. We did not dispose of any of those records, and we noted that they had not been scanned in our inventory. Here is an example of one of those records. This is a proposal for a landscaping update to Duke's East Campus. It was proposed in the 1960s by Olmsted Brothers, a landscape architectural firm initially started by Frederick Law Olmsted, who, as many of you might know, designed Central Park in New York City. As far as I know, this plan never moved forward, but thanks to this project, we do now have a record of what was proposed in the archives. The archive staff learned many lessons from this project. First, plan ahead whenever possible. Although we were working from behind, given how far ahead FMD was in terms of project planning, it was still critical for us to plan ahead as much as we could. Developing initial appraisal guidelines that we could refer to as we started the project was extremely helpful. We expected that we would need to update the guidelines as the project moved forward, but simply having something to start with so we weren't overwhelmed with our first set of records was key to starting off the whole project on the right foot. Second, it was important for us to ask for help with this project and to be clear about what we needed, whether it was requesting additional storage space for Rubenstein Library staff or asking procurement to help us find oversized shred bins. This project was too large for the archives to go it alone. We needed to ask for what we needed, and everyone at Duke was incredibly helpful to us. I want to give a huge shout out to the Rubenstein staff for all their assistance, support, and patience with this project. And I want to give a major thanks to our Duke Library shipping and receiving team, who were incredibly helpful dealing with these often awkward and heavy rolls of drawings. On a related note, clear communication between everyone involved was key. We stayed in regular contact with FMD, and even when FMD had some personnel changes midway through the project, we were still able to continue moving forward. It was also important to ensure that the proper people were included in the communication chain. For example, we asked the vendor who was dropping off materials weekly to communicate directly with shipping and receiving staff. We felt it would be easier for them to coordinate directly than to use us as a middleman, and that allowed for the transfers of records to run as smoothly as they possibly could. And finally, we learned to stay calm no matter what. When we left the initial meeting with FMD, we were stressed out and overwhelmed by the size and scope of this project. It seemed daunting and impossible, but by taking a deep breath and moving forward slowly and deliberately, we were able to get a good handle on the situation. And the result was a successful transfer of records and a wonderful addition to the university archives collections. So what's next for this collection? The collection needs to be fully processed. We have a lot of competing processing priorities right now, and so we need to have some discussions with our technical services staff about how best to approach this collection. We do know that as part of processing, many items will need to be refoldered, so that's going to be an additional resource expense because we're going to have to purchase additional folders. Several of the items that we've reviewed have some conservation concerns, so we will likely need a consultation from our conservation staff on how best to store and preserve some of these materials. And finally, we hope to turn our initial inventory into a usable collection guide. Even if this collection cannot be fully processed for some time, a collection guide will still help researchers and students access the material. Developing the collection guide may involve completing some follow-ups on the notes in our initial inventory, and we may also need to provide additional description for some of the materials. So with that, I will conclude my brief overview of this project. Though this was a challenging project, it did result in a successful completed transfer of historical records. By balancing the urgent demands of the volume of the transfer with thoughtful, slow processes, we were able to successfully complete the transfer of these critical historical records and now have a strong collection to support further research into Duke's architectural history. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm happy to answer your questions during the Q&A, or if you'd like to contact me directly, my email is on this slide. Thank you.